I recommend people that are starting out, you're not sure what you want to do, and you have a topic that you think you want to get into, start with just audio. You can add video later on. Start with audio and see if the topic that you want to talk about resonates with anybody. And then if it does, you can always add video. The worst thing you want to do is start out full-blown production, 3-camera setup, get all this equipment, lighting. You got to go hire someone to do some editing because you probably don't want to do the video editing. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do if you want to compete at the highest level on video. But interestingly, all you need to compete at the highest level on audio is a quiet room and a $150 microphone. And you're on par with NPR.
Podcasting has never been easier to start, yet standing out has never been harder. AI can write scripts, clone voices, generate artwork, and even produce entire shows. But the technology raising the bar also makes one thing more valuable than ever: genuine human connection. My guest on today's show is Rob Walch, Vice President of Podcaster Relations at Captivate. Nearly a decade after his first appearance here, he returns with a fresh perspective on where podcasting is headed. As one of the industry's most respected voices, Rob has watched podcasting evolve through every major shift, from the early days of RSS to the rise of AI. We discuss where podcasting is heading, how AI is helping creators without replacing them, and why human-generated content continues to earn trust. Rob shares what the data really says about YouTube versus audio-first podcasts, why consistency still beats chasing algorithms, and how listener behavior can shape smarter episodes. We also explore common promotion mistakes, sponsorship myths, podcast SEO, and whether it's too late to launch a successful show. If you want your show to grow without losing the human voice that makes people recommend it, this conversation hands you a clear map for getting there. Rob, it's so great to have you back on the show. It has been a long time.
Thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about where things have been in the podcasting world and where you think things are going, because there's been a lot of change with AI, with technology, with acquisitions, and all sorts of different things that make people wonder what they should be doing with their creative outlets, because they can't keep up with all the announcements, all the changes.
Yeah, there's always something new, right? Every day I'm checking the news. Okay, what are people going to be most interested in? But the big one has been AI. How's it going to help? How's it going to hurt? And I always look at AI in multiple buckets. There's the AI tools, and I think the AI tools are really helpful for podcasters. You can use the AI tools to do some research for you. You can use the AI tools to clean up the audio, clean up the video, for researching who you should have for guests. AI tools that help you with the production are great. Then there's the other AI tools. There's the AI tools that create the whole content from scratch, right? For lack of any better term, AI slops. Those are not so good. And there are some people that are creating thousands of shows, not episodes, shows, thousands of shows with hundreds of episodes each. And they are just burning and churning on this fake artificial content, for lack of a better term. You hear it, you know it, it's not good, but their hope is that a few people will check out the shows because they optimize the titles correctly. And if they get a few hundred downloads from thousands of shows, they've gotten a few 100,000 downloads, they monetize that, and the ROI for advertisers is horrible. And then for those podcasters that are doing it the right way, they see their CPMs go down. It's like shoplifting. Yeah. So that I'm not a big fan of. So, but I think there are some really great AI tools to help you out. There's a couple that help you with the post-production and promoting your show, going through and looking at your content, coming up with clips and what to promote. And some will even go out and promote it for you onto social media and things. And those things are great. And you finish your real editing at 2 a.m. and you want to be able to just have these tools kick in and take over for you. And yeah. I'm okay with that.
So which ones are you using? You're using CapCut, for example, or what sort of editing?
And I am not using them yet. I use Adobe. So the biggest AI tool I use is Adobe's tools for cleanup on the audio. Those are the ones I use the most. So Adobe's tools on the AI cleanup have really helped me. So before, where I was going in literally and clipping out every background noise in between. And if I saw something, those little clips, mouth noises,
Yep.
now those take that out. And that saves me so much time on the editing. So that's what I'm using. I'm not using the stuff for promoting. I'm actually looking at a couple. So one's called Puddle. I can't. I don't want to. I'm testing out, so I can't recommend anything quite yet.
Okay. But you use what, the enhanced speech capability from Adobe? Isn't that
Yes.
a free tool?
No, I'm using the paid one.
Okay. But they have a
So
free version, I think. So
yeah,
podcast.adobe.com, you just drop your clip into the page there and it will enhance the speech. It will make it sound like it was in a professional podcasting studio, even if you're in a tin can
yeah,
or out walking the street. It's really impressive.
yeah. I'm using the paid Adobe Podcast one. If you go to podcast.adobe.com, for the enhanced, so I pay for that one. But yeah,
Got it. What's the difference for the enhanced?
you can upload longer clips.
Okay.
So you can. I think that's I have hour plus long episodes when I'm usually editing. So I think that was the one of the bigger differences. And then I think you can upload more. So, but I think probably from the cleanup point of view versus the shorter clips, I don't think there's probably any difference. I think it's the same tools.
What are your thoughts about using AI to simulate your voice? Let's say you write your own scripts and you use 11 Labs, which sounds
Mhm.
spookily
Yes.
like the original podcaster. Are you
Well, and Descript, I mean, has been around for a while. Descript does that as well. Descript will learn your voice. So there's a couple of places where it helps podcasters. One, you lose your voice. I know one podcaster has used to use Descript for that. He does a daily podcast and he lost his voice for a week, and he used Descript to fill in. Now I will say this: he said at the beginning, "You're listening to AI Brian," and he
Hmm,
disclosed, and I think disclosure is really important. There are
I agree.
laws in India that say you need to disclose and you need to state that it's AI voice. So different countries, depending on where you are starting to have different laws come into play. But India's got one, and I recently received an email from GeoSolven that said, due to Indian laws, that if you're using AI and you don't disclose it, when we contact you, you have 3 hours to put the disclosure in, or the content will be removed.
Wow.
I know. So they're coming in, and then the FTC in the U.S. has made it pretty clear that if you're using AI voice, that you're supposed to disclose, especially if you're doing an AI ad read, and if you're using someone's voice to do an ad, that person it needs to be non-endorsement unless it's clearly stated that it's AI, and then but you're not really supposed to do an endorsement. Like you can say, "Hey, Macy's has a sale, 50% off this Saturday." That's fine, but you can't say, "I love Macy's. You should go to
Hmm.
Macy's. You should check out what's going on there." I'm just the biggest fan of Macy's. You can't use AI voice for that.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with the FTC in the U.S. on what you use AI voice for. But
Yeah.
I
Good.
think
Good.
it's
Good point.
yeah, and then there's people that can't speak at all, that have lost their voice, cancer, whatever the reason is, and that. But I still think anytime you use AI voice, just disclose it. Just
Hmm.
disclose that you've done that. And then
Yeah.
just like you should disclose if you used AI to write the script,
Hmm.
a human. There's people that do that too. They have the whole episode is created by AI. They read it with a human voice. You kind of need to say, this content was created with the help or use of Grok or ChatGPT or whatever you're using.
Right. And then there are copyright implications too, because I guess you can't copyright AI generated content.
Yeah, if it's not your content, yeah, if you didn't create it, and the problem comes up with where did AI get that information from? Did they? Because there's been a lot of cases where AI is borrowed content from a source. They're not just making. Well, when they do make it up, they hallucinate. It's usually wrong. So you got to question where it's getting the information from.
Right. And if you guide the AI to essentially copyright infringe by saying, make an image in the style of Ghibli Studio. Of course, it's going to do a pretty uncanny version of a Ghibli Studio image or video. And that's probably a copyright violation, trademark violation too.
And there was a podcast, or there was a studio, we'll call it a studio, that was creating multiple podcasts that were looking at people's that were popular podcasts and creating artwork that looked like their artwork and titles that looked like their titles and putting that content up. And they got called out. Pod News called them out. A few other places called them out on that. So there have been people that have used AI for very nefarious reasons already in the podcast space.
Mm-hmm. Now there's a trend of using podcasts as a way to learn, where you feed it a PDF or some sort of ebook, feed it to Google's Notebook LM, and then it will generate this podcast episode of two, fake people riffing back and forth about the topic that you're trying to learn about. Have you ever tried that?
I have not tried that. I know Spotify, for example, has where you can create your own AI generated podcast based on topics that you're interested in. It could be the news, the local weather, and those are very personalized AI. And that's another bucket, right? Personalized AI generated content for you.
Right.
I think that's fine if you can't find the content on your own that you're looking for, but those very personalized will take up time. They will compete with someone's ears and eyes with human generated content, HGC. So
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, the more of that becomes available, the harder it is for you as a podcaster to find an audience. So you have to be creative. You have to be entertaining. You got to really up your game and make sure you're doing good research and releasing on a consistent basis. I still think that's one of the most important things. Be there. Don't give your audience a reason on a specific Tuesday or Wednesday when the episode's supposed to come out to go find something new to listen to or watch.
So you said be creative and entertaining. How are you upping your game? Because you've been podcasting for what,
I've been podcasting for
15
a
years
long.
or something?
Yeah, so I'm back. My regular podcast is In and Around Podcasting. I do it with Elsie Escobar. Previously, we did a podcast where the last place we were both worked at, and now we're both at Captivate, and we picked back up and we picked that podcast up, and we do that every other Tuesday. It comes out. We record every other Wednesday, and it's really about making sure that we're doing the research and listening to our listeners. What do they want to hear about? I mean, that's in podcasting, that's always been one of the most important things, having feedback from your listeners and answering it and communicating with them and getting some feedback. Like, what do they like? What do they not like? Now, you can also find that out by going into Apple Podcast and looking at your consumption for your episodes. Where are people listening? Where are they dropping off? This is one of the most powerful tools that Apple gives you in Apple Podcast Connect. And if you watch your episode, say it's an hour long, and you find a 15-minute segment where the same percentage listened all the way through, what were you talking about? What was it that captured their attention that they didn't leave? And then conversely, if you see a part where they're dropping off, what is it you're talking about that didn't capture people's attention? Rearrange your episode too. If in the beginning, there's a segment where they drop off and come back. Move that segment to the end of the show if it's a regular segment. If you have a piece that's where they're staying as it near the end, move it closer to the beginning. Rearrange your episode based on what your listeners are actually listening and how they're listening. So,
But if you're learning stuff about a particular episode after it's aired, you don't go back and redo that same episode.
no. I'm talking about planning for future episodes. So if you're talking about a certain topic,
Right.
And listeners are going in, or if it's a certain segment you have, recurring segment in your show, you can learn a lot. I mean, I learned this from my own show where I had a segment where people were constantly listening, not dropping off, and it was where I was playing back listener feedback. So my listeners liked hearing other listeners' feedback and questions. So I moved that to the beginning of the show. And the part they didn't like, there was a segment that they would drop and come back in, was a segment that I loved doing, but people, evidently not all my listeners, loved it as much as I did. I wasn't ready to get rid of it, so I moved it to the end of the show.
What segment's
So
that?
it was a segment on how wrong were they? So I would go find quotes for people. That was for my Today in iOS podcast, and I would find quotes people had made about the iPhone or the iPad in whoever it was. I'd find a quote from 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and then I'd go, how did those quotes work out?
Mm.
And find with using 20 looking back, having the ability to look back, 2020 vision, being able to say, oh, this is why you were wrong. You said the iPhone was going to fail for this, or that big iPhone wasn't going to work, or Apple wasn't going to do this, and no, well, they did it and it worked out. So it was a fun segment for me. It was just a chance to pull up quotes from Steve Ballmer or whoever, and just have a little riff with it. I liked it segment. Again, not all my audience liked it, but some did, but not as
Are you
much
still
as.
doing that show?
Unfortunately, no. That show's kind of gone onto a hiatus, because you asked about upping your game. I just couldn't keep up with that show, the amount of effort that it took to do that show.
Yeah.
I did 20 plus hours a week on that show to do it correctly, and work and move and other things got in the way. And it just too many 5-hour energy drinks up till 3 or 4 in the morning, too many times to get those episodes out and done right. So I kind of pulled back on that, and focused more on the podcasting side of things. And then those are the podcasts that I do the most work on now. I did start another podcast called Space Business 411, where I'm interviewing people that are in startups in the space industry. But that's more of a side hobby project, more because I have a son who is an aerospace engineer at Purdue, and I'm trying to build up a Rolodex for him. So when he graduates, I will have these contacts at all these startups. So I mean, I'm not
Oh.
hiding why I'm started.
That's cool. Great idea. You're a cool dad. So, what do you think about? First of all, actually, before we switch into this topic, but you said you monitor for feedback. Where do you look? Is that like the YouTube comments, Spotify comments? Are you getting emails? People doing the speak pipe audio thing? I never got people, by the way, giving me speak pipe audio feedback ever.
So yeah, I mean, the number one and two ways are email, and then I did get a lot of voicemail feedback. I always have a call in number like 206-666 4357, 206 mom help, or 206-666 6364. That's 206 moon dog. All right, so I'd have these numbers that I have a number I could associate with and tell people, hey, call into this if you have feedback, but also record it on your device and email to me, at, podcast411@gmail.com. Send me your feedback. And I would get a lot of feedback that way. So, and I still have podcast 411 that's on the side. That podcast is still there in the background. And I still I've got 5 episodes recorded that I have to edit and get out. But I started at Captivate in February, and I've been very busy. So I had to put them on hold a little bit while I focus on the podcast for Captivate. And but
Gotcha.
yeah, that's how I get feedback. I will every now and then look at YouTube comments, but YouTube comments are so not helpful. I'll put it that way. Yeah, and it seems like people on YouTube woke up on the wrong side of bed before they go and comment.
Hmm. Yeah, I've gotten some cruel comments on YouTube before on some of my videos. Really undeserved, really disproportionate. Weird. I love this concept from Jay Berry. Actually named a book after it. Hug Your Haters.
Well, you can find a lot of haters on YouTube, that's for sure. I mean, I remember I put a video up that got real popular. It was I bought a go-kart for my kid, and the go-kart had a horrible turning radius. I mean, a turning radius that was like 100 feet. It was my kid had to learn how to do 3-point turns to turn around in the street, and uh, so I figured out how to modify it, and I created this mod plate and I put it on it, and then I put a video up showing, hey, if you get this go-kart, which otherwise was great, I go, here's what you need to do to modify it. And it's still 12 years later, I'm still getting emails from people saying, hey, if you have a question, just email me, I'll send you it. But I would get people that go, I said something like turning radius or circumference, and I used the wrong word, and they're like, "Oh, you said this, and you meant that," and what kind? It's like, I'm just trying to help people out that bought this go-kart for their kids and now are realizing the thing actually doesn't turn left or right. It just goes straight. And here's how you make it turn in a circle.
Yeah. Either I forget where I learned this from, but either you're in critic mode or you're in creator mode. You can't be in both. And people who are in critic mode, yeah, they miss all the creative opportunities because they're always criticizing. If you're in creator mode, you don't have time for criticizing others.
So for your podcast, where are you finding when you promote, where are you finding the best success?
I get more traction with YouTube than other channels for me. It used to be Apple Podcasts, but I'm actually curious to hear what your take is on, is Apple Podcast still a thing? It used to be the thing, and then Spotify, and YouTube apparently is the number one consumption channel for podcast listeners. Is that true?
It's true from a certain point of view. If you include the data from the top 1% of podcasts, then it's true. If you take the top 1% of podcasts and you throw them out and look at the other 99% of podcasts, what you find is YouTube makes up anywhere from 2 to 5% of their audience. So people that are audio first and then come along with video or release the audio as video as a static image, when you look at their audience, Apple Podcasts is number one on average, anywhere from 50 to 65% of their audience. Spotify is number two, anywhere from 15 to 20, 22%, somewhere in that range for number two. And then number three is either Overcast or YouTube, around 3%. So both of them come in pretty close there. And if you have a real tech podcast, Overcast typically is above YouTube. If you have more relationship podcast, then YouTube might be a little higher than Overcast. But again, for the 99% of podcasters, if you're just starting out, unless you really are really good at video, it's a much more competitive market to break through in video. You have a lot more competition. There's less time in the day for people to consume video. So I was saying is, audio, more time in the day for audio. And so what I recommend to people is if you're audio first, remain audio. There's more time, embrace the audio, and you have less competition, and just be consistent on that. Am I saying don't be on YouTube? No. Am I saying don't do video? No. But if you don't want to do video, you don't have to. There are very successful podcasts that are audio only. History podcasts do much better on audio. True crime podcasts do much better on audio. If your audience is going to be female oriented, you're going to have people have more time in the day to consume the audio, especially women who are trying to juggle work and children and everything else. They have a lot more on their plate. So if women are your audience, I would say audio, you're going to be more successful on the audio than you will on the video side of things.
Gotcha.
And if you look at what YouTube has been doing the last year, YouTube, well, everyone else, so Spotify's gone and done video, Apple's done the HLS video, YouTube has been embracing audio. So they've been creating more tools to consume just the audio when the screen closes, and even did announced a partnership with SiriusXM to bring audio-only advertising to YouTube. So YouTube, while everyone else was getting enamored on video, YouTube was going, hey, there's more time in the day to consume audio. We should get this audio thing going. So even YouTube themselves have been embracing audio more.
Right. So there's a YouTube Music app, so you can listen to your favorite artists without having like a Spotify subscription.
Right.
Yep.
And the podcasts are in that YouTube Music. And if your podcast isn't in there in YouTube, you can just take your RSS feed and go and drop it at YouTube, and you just create a channel in your YouTube, or create a podcast in your YouTube channel, and it connects. And when you release a new episode, automatically publishes that new episode into YouTube. It's pretty easy to set up. Some podcast hosting companies, you can just publish right from your host right to YouTube. But if you want to control it, again, you can just drop your feed in over at YouTube Music.
But what if you are using a hosting platform for your podcast, like I am, your former employer I'm using? And what if I want to switch, let's say to Captivate, and all those RSS URLs will need to be updated, everything from Apple Podcast Connect, Spotify, everything.
Right. Switching podcast host is really actually easy. It's just a simple redirect at whatever host you're at. You add in the redirect, and then it redirects to your new host. So that will cover you for the majority of your downloads. That's why anyone that's consuming from the RSS feed. If you were connected in YouTube, um, if you were taking the audio and having it automatically generated to video up at YouTube, you just need to go into your studio.youtube account and update it to be the RSS feed, and then it'll pull from that RSS feed. So you disconnect over where you were, and now you connect the RSS feed in, and it's a pretty easy process. Any hosting company you move to will give you guidance, and it's always the hosting company you're moving to should be the one that gives you the help on the move, not the one that you're moving from, right? It's not incentivized for them to help you. So you always reach out to the company you're moving to and say, hey, I want to move over. And they'll give you the guidance on what needs to be done. But it's pretty easy. I've moved so many shows over the years from one hosting company to another. And then you leave where you've moved from live for 30 days. You see if there's any traffic to the direct URLs. Then you track down where that traffic's coming from, make some updates on those links. Sometimes maybe you've gotten mentioned in a blog, or like you had an episode that went viral. Someone put a clip to the direct URL for that episode, or maybe you interviewed somebody and they put the player up on their site, and you see you're getting traffic from that. You just go to them, go, hey, here's a new player. Can you replace this on your blog? Or here's a new link. Can you replace this on your social media post? So those are ways to make sure you're still getting all the traffic when you move. But it is rather easy to move. And at Captivate, we even allow you to bring in some of your stats from your previous hosts. So you can bring in some legacy stats that go over in a legacy area of the statistics.
That's cool. But what if, like, say your RSS feed URL is rss.libsyn.com/shows/da-da-da, and that's what you fed to Apple Podcasts and you fed it to Spotify? That's what I did for both my shows.
And that's fine. When you put the redirect in from, say, Libsyn to Captivate, it will redirect the traffic over to the new URL. Apple Podcasts and others will look at that and realize that there's a new URL, and they update their database.
Okay. But I still have to
So
have an active subscription with the old provider while
no,
that.
once you close down your old provider, a permanent redirect will go in place if the
Okay.
provider is good.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah,
Okay.
and no, in Libsyn, if you close down your account, there's a permanent redirect goes in place. So I always think keep it up for 30 days, then you can close down the account, and the permanent redirect's in place, and you're good. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So you
Okay.
won't lose your audience.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Yeah.
good to know. So you mentioned if you're just starting out, and that made me think about, well, are new podcasters just starting out, or did they miss the boat? Is it too late to enter the podcasting space, in other words?
Yeah, a lot of people get scared. They'll hear numbers thrown around like 2.8 million, 2.9 million podcasts, I've seen 4.7, 4.8 thrown out from different services. The reality is active podcasts releasing new content in the last 30 days or last 90 days is less than 500,000. And if you take it to how many have released new content and have at least 10 episodes live, then you're under 400,000. That's it. And 400,000 to some might sound like a lot, but when you look at how many hundreds of millions of YouTube channels there are, or how many hundreds of millions of blogs there are, 400,000 is a really small number, and gives you an opportunity to stand out, differentiate yourself from others by having a podcast.
And do you think
So
it should be mainly an audio podcast that they should be focusing on, or if they want to do like a YouTube video type of channel/podcast, that there's still room for that?
it ultimately will depend on what you're talking about, what you have comfort doing, how much time you have and money you have for equipment, for production. Audio, I recommend people that are starting out, you're not sure what you want to do. Audio, and you have a topic that you think you want to get into, start with just audio. You can add video later on. Start with audio and see if the topic that you want to talk about resonates with anybody. And then if it does, you can always add video on. The worst thing you want to do is start out full-blown production, 3-camera setup, get all this equipment, lighting. You got to go hire someone to do some editing because you probably don't want to do the video editing. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do if you want to compete at the highest level on video. But interestingly, all you need to compete at the highest level on audio is a quiet room and a $150 microphone. And you're on par with NPR. You want to be on par with PBS. It's a lot more expensive. It's a lot more intensive. And if you're just getting into it, I say start with audio. Now, maybe the topic you want to talk about, maybe it has to be video. Maybe you want to do reviews of products and that. And maybe it doesn't even need to be a podcast at that point. Maybe you just do YouTube if it's really going to be video only. Um, the question comes down to if the video goes off and you just listen, you close the screen and you just listen, is there value to that? If there's value to it when the screen's off, and a lot of interviews like this interview right now, screens off, same value as screen on. That's a podcast, right? You can do video, and some of the big ones, Joe Rogan does that, and he does well on that. But even Joe Rogan gets more consumption, more downloads from the audio than he gets from video views. So he gets a lot on video. Don't get me wrong, but he still has a huge audience for a 3 hour episode. It's easier to find 3 hours in your day to listen than it is to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So I my recommendation is if you're not sure, start with audio. That's just the simplest solution.
Yeah.
Work
And what
out.
about promoting it? Like, how do you get a new show out into the world and get people listening?
There, you're going to want some video clips. Video clips definitely help out in social media.
Mhm.
But you also are going to have to cross promote and other podcasts in your genre. What you don't want to do is hire someone off of LinkedIn that reached out to you who says they are a podcast promotion professional from Bangladesh. They are not. They will take your money. They will give you a fake audience. You don't want to actually sign up for any service that guarantees downloads. Anybody that says, I'm going to get you downloads, will not grow your audience. So promotion really comes down to if you can cross promote with other podcasts, if you can't put your pay to have your promo run on another podcast in your genre. Right? It doesn't do you any good if you're an MMA podcast to have your promo run on a true crime podcast. The audiences are completely different. They're not going to work out for you. But if you're a history podcast and you've got a history podcast and you want to talk about, I don't know, the Louisiana Purchase, and you want to create a podcast all about the Louisiana Purchase, then running a promo on the Revolutions podcast with Mike Duncan or running a promo on History on Fire podcast, those would be great places to get word out about your show and hit an audience that cares about that kind of topic. So know who your audience is going to be. The other thing, and the most important thing on promoting your podcast, is the title of your show. People try to get really cute with the title of their show. What I say is think about 3 or 4 keywords you would search for to find a podcast on your topic. And now you've found the words that need to be in the title of your show, because that's what other people are going to do. I started the space podcast, and I was like, do I want to call it Space Business 411 or Space Economy 411? Well, I went to Google Trends and I said, are more people searching for space business or space economy? And it was like 10-1 people were searching for space business over space economy. So my podcast became Space Business 411. I like space economy personally better. And if the trends ever change, I will change the title of my show to Space Economy 411. That's the other thing. Don't be married to the title of your podcast. If trends in the world change with them. Use Google Trends, although not many people a lot of people are using AI these days over Google, but there's still a lot of people still searching in Google. And it's enough to give you an idea of what are people searching for. And so the title is so important. And then the artwork, having good looking artwork where the title is clearly shown when you shrink the artwork down to 55 by 55 pixels, because that's how it's going to preview up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and other places. So good artwork, good title, cross promote. If you're launching, those are some of the best things you can do to launch a podcast, and be consistent. It's tough. We see a lot of people that get 5 episodes in, 6 episodes in, and they quit. They give up. They pod fade early. They didn't realize it was going to be hard work, or they hoped that they were going to have 1,000 or 10,000 listeners out the gate, and they didn't get that, and they give up. Understand that this is it's a long play podcasting. It's not short-term viral. There are no algorithms in Apple Podcasts that you can game to move up. There are some, algorithms in YouTube, but there are not algorithms on the Apple Podcast or the Spotify side, really, for that matter,
Right.
to
So,
give you
so
points
getting a
like that.
certain number of reviews in a certain period of time, ratings, or uh, listens is not going to shoot you up to the top of Apple Podcasts.
There's different charts, and different charts work different ways. So Apple Podcast charts for the top shows is based on the total number. It's based on the number of new subscribers in the last 7 days with a weighted average for the last 24, 48, 72 hours. So if you have like an organic email list that you have, when you launch your podcast, send a link out to everybody and say, go to Apple Podcast and subscribe to my show. Right. That's a great way to move you up that chart. Then there's the top episode list. That's based on consumption. That one, you're not, as a new show, you're not going to get in that one, period. Right. Because those are shows that are established, and you'll go and look at the top 200 overall, and you'll see that Joe Rogan usually has like 4 or 5 episodes in the top 200 because he is that big. Right? But the top shows list, that one is always having shows that are brand new because it's based on new subscribers in the last 7 days, and a few hundred subscribers in a couple days will move you to the top of almost any category. And you get 500 or 600 in a day, and you're more than likely going to break into the top 100 of shows overall. So it doesn't take a lot to get you there. So if you have a large organic email list, not one you purchased from somebody that says, hey, buy this list, but an organic list that you've built over time for your other presences on the internet, that's another great way when you launch a podcast to promote out there.
Right. Cool. And are you advertising on other people's podcasts?
I personally don't. I, 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 I'm not trying to make the money. I've been around. I've got email lists. I've got people to reach out to and social presence. So I don't. I probably should. When I launched the space business one, there was a couple of like This Week in Space with the Twit network. I probably should have ran a promo on there. Maybe I will if I get a few more interviews in the can. Maybe I'll reach out to Lisa over Twit and go, hey, I want to run a promo. Can you run a promo for my show? But yeah, knowing what are the right podcasts to run it on. I haven't done it yet. Now we are making it easier at Captivate. I'll say this. We just launched a marketplace, and if you're in Captivate, you can put your podcast into the marketplace, and then if you want a place to come over and find a podcast to promote on, you can find a podcast and negotiate with them a rate to run a promo on their shows. And there are other places too. Podtrac just announced a promo service that you can use as well. So Podtrac has something. So I don't want to just talk about Captivate. There's other services out there, and there's promo exchanges. There's some free ones as well, where people have agreed to do exchanges. So if you do some research, you can find different places to run promos on podcasts. What I don't like is the feed drops. And there's services out there that do these feed drops. And it says you might also like, and it's an episode that's like becomes one older than your most recent episode. And the problem with that is like someone like Jay Shetty will use that service, and his podcast will then be a feed drop on like 8 or 9 or 10 or 100 different podcasts. And listeners will see that on multiple podcasts they listen to and complain. It's one of the most complained about features in podcasting. I've seen a lot of from listeners' perspective, complain about this, giving negative reviews to apps, thinking that the apps were putting these promotions in. And the worst part is it doesn't say it's a paid promotion. And to me, that's not ethical.
Right.
I think if you're going to have these feed drops, it should clearly state that this was a paid promotion. And I think when it doesn't, it confuses the listeners, and that's why the listeners complain about it. They don't know who it was. They don't realize that the podcaster was getting paid for it, things like that. And ultimately, again, listeners just don't seem to like feed drops. They don't want a whole episode of another show on their feed. I mean, there was a point, what was it? Gimlet. I remember if you went and looked at half the Gimlet shows, the last 3 or 4 episodes were all feed drops of other shows, not the show you were actually subscribed to. So
yeah,
I don't recommend you do feed drops, even though we're going to offer feed drops. I've seen too much complaints from listeners about it.
Yeah. What about podcast swaps? Like guests, I'll be a guest on your show if you're a guest on mine. What's your
Great.
take on that?
That's a great way to promote because you're bringing value hopefully to the other show, and you're getting exposed to another audience. So you're doing a favor to that show, and they're doing a favor to come on yours. And hopefully it's great content and content works out well, and both audiences win, and hopefully each producer wins by getting a little bit of those other audiences. And people are like, oh well, some people are like, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to lose my audience, and they forget there's 168 hours in a week, and your show was maybe one of them. So people have time for a couple other shows. Most podcast listeners that are power listeners listen to 5 or 6 episodes a week on average, depending on which Edison research report you look at. So people are consuming more than an hour worth of content. I mean, Joe Rogan, right, number one, his shows are 3 hours long. So there's a lot of time out there for people to
Well,
consume.
that's your whole listening budget, probably, if you're the average. It's just that one show.
My younger son especially likes Joe Rogan, so he'll listen on that, but he listens to others, and so he finds time.
How many shows are you listening to a week?
Regular podcasts that I listen to week after week after week, there's about 3, and 2 are history, and 1 is all in. And then after that, I sample 10, 20 different shows a week. One episode, I move on. One episode, I move on, because I Captivate. I'm trying to learn who our podcasts are. And then every now and then I'll find one that I really like, and then I get stuck listening to like 10 episodes. I'll have 10 episodes playing. I have a home pod that sits on my desk, so I usually have the podcast playing on the home pod. So it's in the background. But then when I get on phone calls, I got to hit pause. But if I'm not on a phone call, I'm working on spreadsheets, emails, I usually have a podcast going. Every now and then something really good comes, I'm like, oh, I got to stop working on my emails right now. I got to listen to this. I got to go back. I'm like, hey Siri, go back, 1 minute.
So, would you say that for the vast majority of podcasts, it's really a cost center or a labor of love and not a profit center?
Oh, for the vast majority of podcasts, yeah. If you're getting into podcasting to make money, I always say, well, how much money were you going to spend on your podcast? All right, now go to Vegas, go to the roulette wheel, and put it on black or red, whichever one you're feeling, because you're going to have a much, much better odds of making money with that on Vegas on that roulette wheel with that than you are getting in launching a podcast. Yes, but where podcasting makes people the most money is it sets them up as an authority, where they're not using the podcast to make money from advertising or merchandise or premium, but rather to present themselves as an authority in their field. A lot of people get in and they do a podcast on a specific niche that they're in. They get invited to speak at different conferences. They get consulting work. I mean, what was it? Project management podcast, I think it was, BMP. They launched the podcast on a project management, and 2-3 years later, they were charging 4 times the rate that they were charging before they launched the podcast, and they were basically sold out. They couldn't take any more clients on. So they used the podcast about what they did and the service they offered to make money. John Jantz from Duct Tape Marketing, another great example, where
Yep, he's been a guest on this show. Yep.
Right. And if you talk to John, he used the podcast as a intelligent way to get cold leads, right? Rather than sending someone an email saying, hey, I have this marketing service and offering, he said, hey, I think you're brilliant, and I think your brilliance would be really greatly shared with my audience. Why don't you come on the show? He would talk with them and go, oh, by the way, I do this, and if you ever need this, let me know. And he talked about that. He got clients by interviewing people that he thought were potential clients. So it's a brilliant way to use a podcast to make money is figure out, if you're a consultant, figure out who your clients are and interview them.
Yep. Yeah, we just did an episode not long ago about that very topic. Jason Osborne. He gets a lot of clients from inviting his ideal client avatar to be a guest on his show. Yeah, and he actually provides that as a service to other businesses. Helps them get clients who would be just agreed to be guests, and then once they're a guest, and they're interested in a second call, and that call is where they get closed.
Yeah.
What
So
about
that
sponsorships and getting like having some of the costs offset with a sponsorship? What percentage would you guess of podcasts are sponsored or take advertising?
it's up probably in the 5% range, and that have advertising, right? And of that 5%, most of them are getting programmatic ads now, of those that have ads. And the ones that actually have a true sponsor, like the sponsor says, I want to advertise on your specific podcast, that number is down, probably still in the 1% range, 2% at best, 2%. Because not all the big podcasts, first off, a lot of people don't realize, not all the big podcasts want advertisement, right? The Trader Joe's podcast, huge podcast, large number of downloads. It will never take ads, right? To Trader Joe's podcast isn't about advertising. It's about promotion. The podcast itself is a promotion vehicle. So there are a lot of large podcasts. There's the podcast from Consumer Reports. There, Ping Golf had a podcast. Callaway had a podcast, right? Those podcasts, branded podcasts, will never take ads, and there's some big ones. So now you have to go to the pool that will take ads, and of those, there's not that many percentage wise of the podcasts out there that are big enough for a sponsor to say, yes, I'm going to work with you. Now, there are some small shows that will get sponsorship because they're in a very specific niche. And that is going to be up to you as the podcaster to find that sponsor. Like if there's a Chameleon Breeder podcast. If you're the Chameleon Breeder podcast, there's only a few people in the world that are going to advertise on your show, but you're the only show they're going to advertise on. So you guys have to just meet. Right? There's nowhere else if you're making breeding cages for chameleons. There ain't a lot of places that you're going to find an audience that's going to fit for you. So you have to find that and match up. So the more niche you get into, the more specialty, the higher dollar that niche, the more opportunity there is. But you have to do the work. The horse podcasts, Glenn the Geek with his whole horse equine network. Not very big podcast, but they do get sponsorship because there's a lot of money in equine. So if you're going to get into a niche, here's a trick: get into a niche that has money. Right? Don't get into a niche where everybody's broke. You don't want to be in a niche. Uh, I'm trying to think. I don't want to get into it, but there are certain niches you want to stay away from that the audience is not going to have any money. So stay away from the broke teenagers, don't have a job yet niche.
Got it. Okay. So a couple quick questions before we close out the interview. One is, what's your take on avatar type of episodes or channels? For example, Julia McCoy has a very popular AI clone YouTube channel, and those are actually pretty good, those episodes. But they're all AI. It's an AI. It's AI audio and it's AI video. So she's using HeyGen for the video and 11 Labs for the audio. But
Is
it's
she
actually quite a good show.
is she clearly
Yeah.
defining it that it's
Yeah,
AI
yeah. It's
generated?
clearly disclosed. Yep.
As long as you're clearly disclosing it, I have no problem with it. That's and you're not just doing, again, you're not where you're a studio creating hundreds and thousands of shows for the sole purpose of tricking
Right.
people into the content. So if you're not trying to deceive the audience in any way, shape, or form, you're clearly disclosing it's AI. It's just going to be part of the ecosystem. There's no way around that. People are going to have this created. People are going to come up with ideas. They're going to, use their tokens to get the content created. And they're just going to say, this is what I want this episode to be about. And this is what I want that. But and they may even say to the AI, tell me what my next 10 episodes will be about. Right. So, there's still a little gray matter in there. They're probably still picking the topic in the episode. There's some interaction.
Yeah, well, with Julia's channel, she's definitely, I think, even writing the entire video script herself. But even if it's AI assisted, it's very much guided by her. She's just not the one in front of the camera, putting on makeup beforehand and getting all camera ready, all that sort of stuff. Because there's only a certain number of hours in the day, and she puts out a lot of video content there wouldn't be a possible way she could do that without using AI.
Yeah. Well, especially if she's creating the content part of it, that puts it into a different category.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the 100% created AI content and imagery and audio. It just doesn't come across as natural.
Yeah, it feels
Um,
soulless, but at some point, AI will be so good that we won't be able to tell the difference. I think, and
yeah.
who knows what's going to happen when we get to that point. But
Well, there are some videos like you'll see the video come up and you're like, is that real or not? And you hear the voice and go, oh wait, that's the same voice as the burner banana ads. And you go, okay, yeah, that's fake. So there's certain voices that you'll hear. There's some podcasts I've come across where you start hearing it and you're like, oh wait, I know that voice. That's an AI voice.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, but it's going
so
to be to the point
you're right.
where you'll have unlimited voices. So it's yeah, crazy world we're heading into, which I guess leads me to the last point here is last question is like, what's the future hold for us podcasters when, the question of even will websites be relevant anymore is a serious question. Like 3 years from now, maybe AI agents will be conversing and transacting with other AI agents much more so than humans visiting websites or even agents visiting websites because it's not efficient to be clicking around and swiping and zooming in and clicking and all that sort of stuff. Why not just have your personal agent communicate with IKEA and its personal agent instead of going to IKEA's website? And so in that era, which could be just a couple, 2, 3 years away, where does podcasting sit? Does it still have a place at the table, or is it still relevant?
I believe it is relevant, and I'll tell you why. The most popular podcasts, when you look at them, usually hit two key points: they educate, they entertain, and those two are really important. How do podcasts become popular? It's the same way movies become popular: word of mouth. At the end of the day, the shows that are the biggest. When I've talked to the biggest podcasters out there, and I've asked them, "What did you do to promote your show?" Most of them have the same answer: nothing. The biggest ones, it's really annoying. You get a really big podcast on and you get in there and you're like, okay, what's your marketing secret? And it's like nothing. My audience promoted it for me. It's just like Sixth Sense, right? Sixth Sense was a great movie. Everybody said go see it. Here's the thing about human generated content versus AI generated content. Humans are going to be a lot less likely to recommend to their friends you go listen to this AI generated content than they are human generated content,
Yeah.
because there's still a stigma around it, and it will be for a long time, that you're going to say, oh, I'm listening to this AI, or are you going to say, oh, go listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, right? I'm going to 100 times out of 100 recommend Dan Carlin or Mike Duncan, or a human podcast than I would ever sheepishly say, oh, go check out this podcast that's all AI generated. You're going to love it. So I think word of mouth marketing will still favor human generated content because we're going to be speciesists, right? What was it? Who was it? Someone from Google once accused Elon of being a speciesist because he was biased towards humans. It was, I can't remember, I think it was Sergey or one of the founders of Google. I remember calling him Elon, saying that really scared him. But I'm okay being a species. I am biased towards humans over AI. Just don't let the AI overlords know about that when they come, when Terminator days come. But yeah,
Yeah,
let me
what
have
you, what you just did.
yeah, I guess I did. Yep. Yes. But no, and I still think most people are. I think most people are going to be biased to recommend human generated content. And if you're more interactive with your audience, you're more likely to get your audience to recommend your content.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, great way to end this episode. Thank you so much, Rob, for coming back on the show after what, a decade or something. I think it was.
Yeah, been about 10 years.
Yeah. Wow. So thank you again, and congratulations on your move to Captivate and with your continued success and popularity on your podcasts. And yeah, keep up the great work.
All right. If any of your listeners want to get a hold of me, have any questions on podcasting, just email me rob.walch@global.com or rob@podcast411.com. Either way, I put my email out there. I try to be human, and I will reply to your emails. It will not be my AI agent.
Awesome. All right. And then if they want to check out your employer, Captivate, and maybe host their podcast with Captivate, where do they go?
Captivate.fm.
Awesome.
So Captivate.fm is just how it sounds. No funky web 3.0 spelling or anything like that.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you, Rob, and thank you, listener. Go out there and make it a better world. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off. If you want to hear more conversations like this about making authentic connections with your audience, then I recommend episode 504 with Pat Flynn, episode 522 with me, Stephan Spencer, and episode 543 with Jay Acunzo. Also, I invite you to check out the show notes, transcript, action-based checklist, and all the URLs mentioned in this interview with Rob Walch at marketingspeak.com/547. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share the episode and, more importantly, the entire show Marketing Speak with a friend. It'll really help this podcast grow and reach an impact. Thank you.